The Vethrock have 7 words for spatial certainty, and none of them, as far as I can tell, translate to feels about right. That was the first thing I noticed when I came aboard the Orith Sal. The nav suite took up most of the mid-deck, a cathedral of silver instruments, each one calibrated to tolerances I couldn't read without a magnifier. Navigator Prime Vetharon and his 4-person team moved through it like priests in a very precise religion. Everything quantified, everything logged to 11 decimal places. They spoke in coordinates the way other people speak in sentences, and when they disagreed about an approach vector, the disagreement sounded like a very calm auction. I was introduced as the Human Spatial Liaison, Orientation Function, Supplementary. Vetharon looked at me, the way you look at something that has found its way into the wrong room. Polite, faintly baffled. He had a long face, pale silver membrane over angular bone, and his eyes were set wide and very still. The Vetharock don't blink often. When Vetharon looked at you, you felt assessed and filed. Your role, he said, will be to observe the transit procedure and provide any cultural context useful to the mission record. Cultural context. I'd been flying fold transit routes for 9 years. Happy to help, I said. He moved on. That was the extent of my onboarding. I found a folding chair near the secondary console and set up there for the duration. I had a clipboard, actual paper, actual pencil, the kind of thing the Vethrak found endearing, in the way you find a very old map endearing, framed on a wall somewhere, not in active use. I used it to sketch fold geometries. It was something I did on long transits. You look at the approach vectors, the mass signatures, the local curvature data coming off the instruments, and you draw what the fold probably looks like. Not precisely, roughly, the way you might sketch a face from memory, close enough to recognize, not accurate enough to file. Junior Navtech Vetharon saw me doing it on the second day. He stopped, looked at the sketch for a long moment, then looked at me. What is the quantified basis for this rendering? He asked. There isn't one, I said. It's an estimate. He made a sound. The Vethrock don't laugh the way humans do. It's more of a dry, resonant hum from somewhere behind the collar ridge, very soft, barely audible. I had learned to recognize it. He went back to his console. That evening, the Orith Sal ran on a standard day cycle for the benefit of the joint crew. I overheard Vetharon telling the others. He described my sketching with a kind of fond disbelief, the way you describe something a child has done. He used the word I would later have translated, and the translation came back as something close to impression marking, which in Vethrock apparently sits somewhere between a sensory reflex and a hobby, neither of them operationally relevant. Vetharon asked what the sketch showed. Vetharon described it. There was a pause, and then the whole nav team produced that hum in unison, soft and layered. I turned a page and kept sketching. The fold boundary we were transiting was designated Kethoral 7, a gravitational fold in the outer survey margin, complex geometry, heavy mass shadow from a collapsed dwarf about 40,000 kilometers off the primary approach axis. The Vethrock instruments were built for clean folds. This one wasn't clean. Vetharon had filed 3 approach vectors with the survey consortium and had all 3 approved. He was confident. The instruments said he should be. On day 3, I sketched the fold from the curvature data available on the open feed. The mass shadow looked, to me, like it was cycling. Slow, rhythmic, the kind of pattern that gets lost when you sample it too fast and average the readings. I noted the cycle time in the corner of the page. Roughly 4 minutes, 40 seconds. I wasn't certain. It was an estimate. I didn't say anything about it. Nobody had asked. We hit the boundary edge on day 4. The primary nav array registered the mass shadow at 0.7 on approach, which was within tolerance. Then the fold did what complex folds do, which is refuse to behave like the model. The mass shadow shifted, not dramatically, not dangerously, but enough. The array's solution engine ran the correction and produced an exit vector. Then it ran it again, because the first answer conflicted with the mass data. Then it ran it a third time and produced a third answer, different from both. Vetharon stood very still in front of his instruments for a moment. Then he said, quietly, recursive failure. Hold transit position. Holding position at a fold boundary is not comfortable. The Orith Sal sat at the edge, gravity gradient pulling unevenly across the hull, while Vetheran and his team worked. They pulled manual override. They ran the correction on the secondary array. They got 4 answers from 4 systems, none of them matching. Vetheran ran a 5th check on the tertiary feed and got a 5th answer. Nobody hummed. Nobody said anything about impression marking. I had been watching the mass data come in since we hit the boundary. I had been sketching. The fold wasn't doing what the models said it should, but it was doing something consistent. There was a pattern in the drift. The mass shadow was cycling, slow and regular, like a long breath. If you timed the cycle, the exit window opened on a narrow band every 4 minutes and 40 seconds. You couldn't see it in the instrument readouts because the arrays were sampling at a rate too fast, catching every fluctuation, averaging them into noise. But if you watched the raw feed and stopped trying to quantify it, it was there. I could see it. I couldn't have told you why, exactly. 9 years of fold transits, a lot of sketches, and something in the back of your brain starts to recognize shapes the way you recognize faces. Non-quantified, not operationally admissible. I looked at Vetheran. He was going to wait for his instruments to agree. They were going to keep not agreeing. I stood up from the folding chair and walked over to the primary console. "I think I know the exit window," I said. Vetheran looked at me the way he had on day 1. The rest of the team went very still. "Your systems are sampling too fast," I said. "The mass shadow is cycling. 4 minutes, 40 seconds. The exit window opens for about 35 seconds near the top of each cycle. We're about 90 seconds out from the next one." He looked at my clipboard. I had the cycle sketched out, the drift, the pattern, the window marked with a small arrow. Rough, clear. "This is not a quantified solution," he said. "No," I said. There was a long pause. The hull ticked. Gravity pulled. "Show me," he said. I walked him through it. The raw feed, not the processed output. The rhythm in the data, once you stopped averaging it. I pointed to where the next window would open. He watched. Vetheran watched over his shoulder. The other 3 watched from their stations. The window opened on schedule. "Now," I said. Vetheran held for 2 seconds. I felt them, and then he put the Orith sail through. We came out clean on the other side of Ketharal 7, full hull integrity, navigation systems syncing to the exit coordinates without complaint, because on this side of the fold, the geometry was simple, and the instruments knew exactly what to do. Nobody said anything for a while. Vetheran ran his post-transit checks. His team ran theirs. Vetheran looked at my clipboard once, briefly, and then looked at his console. After some time, Vetheran said, "The cycle period you identified." "Yes," I said. "You calculated it from the available curvature feed." "I estimated it, on day 3. Another pause. The instruments hummed their usual hum. "You did not mention this." "You didn't ask," I said. He processed that for a moment. Then he went back to his instruments. The post-incident report, when it came through from the survey consortium 3 weeks later, described the transit solution as non-standard spatial intuition, applied to raw gravitational feed data, unquantified method, outcome decisive. It noted that the human navigation liaison had identified a cyclical exit window that all 4 primary array systems had failed to resolve, and that the transit was completed successfully on the liaison's guidance. It recommended the incident be reviewed by the Vethrock Nav Institute's methodology board. The sketch was filed as supporting navigational evidence. My clipboard made it into the appendix of a formal survey document. Somebody had the page scanned and notation stamped in the upper right corner. One small Vethrock glyph that I later had translated. It meant, assessed, pending classification. As far as I know, it's still pending. I didn't ask. Some things are clearer when nobody says them out loud.